World went past 10 days.
That is true. Well, so I wanted to introduce you to our members. Thank you so much for joining us today. The purpose of today's forum is to provide a venue for our members to hear from you and to ask questions as our business community is, emerging from the pandemic and trying to get back to business. We really appreciate your efforts in DC to represent us. So I have informed everyone that if they'd like to ask a question, they can put it in the chat box. But we just wanted to kick things off with just giving you some time to talk about the last 10 days and what your experience has been in DC so far and any insights you have for us.
I had the pleasure of being invited to attend the State of the Union, or the first presidential address, last evening, and that was a real honor to do so. There was a lot of talk of bipartisanship, but we've yet to see that in Congress, but I remain hopeful and optimistic that will come to fruition. Going into Congress as an incoming member during a pandemic, it has its own set of challenges, just as you all have had challenges this past year with the pandemic. But just like we're meeting virtually today, trying to meet and interact with legislators on both sides of the aisle, when you're not allowed to get together, you don't see each other, you vote in blocks so that you're not together on the floor, has made it challenging coming in to Congress. But nonetheless, we've had advanced some legislation. One of my pieces of legislation, a bipartisan piece of legislation directed at something we already do in Iowa, which is we're allowed to return drugs to a pharmacy, doing the same thing for veterans. It's called the dump opioids, which is having the VAs have a locked box where opioids and unused medications can be disposed of for veterans. And that's a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation passed in the Senate side. So now it'll come back to the House and hopefully pass on the House side. We have several bipartisan pieces of legislation on veterans issues. And we're continuing to work on issues with healthcare access. And then I'm working with Representative Diana Harshberger, who's a pharmacist and a new member as well, on prescription drug prices and the PBMs, looking at the PBMs and what regulation needs to be done there, because the PBMs, or pharmacy benefit managers, serve as an intermediary middleman, which offers a little value but really escalates prices when pharmaceutical companies have to put rebates that go primarily to the PBM in order to get their medications or drugs on a formulary to be included in an insurance plan. So those are the kinds of things that I'm working on committee-wise. I am on Homeland Security, Education and Labor, Veterans Affairs, and then I'm on the subcommittee task force on the coronavirus, and then I have 6 subcommittees. So I tend to be busy. 3 committees I heard was a lot. 4 committees is even more, but it was a pleasure to meet in the hearing with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Lewinsky of the CDC. So with that, it's probably more important that I answer your questions than it is that I talk.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, that's great to hear that you're so busy, because that means that we have even bigger influence on the decisions that are being made. So really appreciate your hard work. So one of the things that we are very concerned about in this coming year is the cost of healthcare. And I don't know if David Bywater is on this call. He usually asks this question for us, but we heard from Senator Ernst yesterday and Senator Grassley on Tuesday about some of the things that they're seeing ahead for healthcare and helping small businesses really just limit those costs. It's hard for them to compete for workforce anyway, and adding the cost of healthcare on top of everything is just really limiting their ability to grow. So can you talk to me about what your thoughts are around healthcare in the coming year?
Well, although the words were not said last night in the president's address, we know that the majority party wants to go to a Medicare for All program. And while a Medicare for all or a single payer system may reduce an individual's out-of-pocket costs, that doesn't reduce cost to the overall system. It actually doesn't address healthcare costs at all. So I think that from our standpoint, it's very concerning for small businesses, whether having the opportunity to have larger groups and associations to do association plans, as has been done before in the past, allowing small businesses to have the flexibility of contributing to a plan and then letting their employees go either onto the marketplace or work in an individual manner, and to have the flexibility of the plan that they design is something that can control and reduce costs. And then for those plans that include prescriptions, prescription drug cost is another avenue for that. As a conference, we are actually looking at the whole healthcare system. To me, one of the biggest obstacles is, as you said, cost. And it's a cost not just to individuals, it's a cost to small businesses especially, but even a cost to larger employers. Looking at the tax side of the issue is also an avenue for some reduction in cost. But I think just going to a Medicare for all plan and expanding Medicaid is not going to reduce costs for any of us. It shifts cost to the private sector.
Well, and I have my next question here is from Rachel Kilberg from the city of Iowa City. And we have some infrastructure questions for you because we know that's going to be a hot topic, and then also talking about community funded projects. So Rachel, would you like to ask your question next?
Sure. Well, first, thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us today. We really appreciate you carving out the time to be with us, and your team has been so wonderful to work with thus far. We're really looking forward to working with you all more in the future here. But as Jennifer mentioned, we've been really encouraged to hear talks of an infrastructure bill coming out of Washington, and over the past year through the pandemic, as well as events like the derecho that moved through Iowa last summer, we've seen kind of gaps in resiliency. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on an infrastructure bill and what you believe should be in that so that we can be better prepared for the future.
So I've heard you actually say two things: one, gaps in infrastructure, and then gaps in resiliency. And so to me, I don't know if you're combining infrastructure with resiliency and you're looking at social programs and resiliency and the effect on an individual or a family. To me, infrastructure is precisely what it says, and that's infrastructure. The current infrastructure bill, you have 75% of it does not go to infrastructure. And I think I am fully on board with locks, dams on the Mississippi, roads, bridges, including the Gilbert Street Bridge in Iowa City is a project we didn't get any information about, but I know it's something in Iowa City that's a challenge. The electric grid infrastructure, I think, is very important in broadband. Already in my area in Southeast Iowa, broadband was an issue, rural broadband is an issue, but even in urban areas, there are gaps in high-speed internet coverage in urban areas. So whether you're a rural area, whether you're in an urban area where there's spotty coverage, broadband is a tremendous issue that was only further underscored by the pandemic, be it telehealth, telemedicine, telework, telelearning. We know that in order for us to be able to educate people, to train people, to be competitive in a global economy, that broadband's a necessary part of that. I think that there is tremendous support, and we've already seen that on the Senate side with Senator Manchin and speaking with Senator Graham, that there may be some avenue for a compromise bill in the $600,000 range. But when you think about infrastructure and our decaying infrastructure and the needs that we have, to have a $2.3 trillion bill where only less than 25% of it actually goes to infrastructure, I think it makes it extraordinarily challenging. Not that the other things aren't valuable or not necessary, but those are things that could be carved out, discussed separately, and then advanced in a bipartisan manner. So that's the difficulties I have with the current infrastructure bill. So looking forward to see what comes out of the Senate. If there are other agreements that come out of the Senate that would cover what we consider, or what most people, when you talk to people and I actually asked this question, people who said, we want the Republicans, it was a polling with swing voters. We want the Republicans to work on infrastructure. We don't understand. And when I asked if you knew of a bill in which only 115 billion of 2.3 trillion goes to roads and bridges, we do consider that an infrastructure bill. And they all were surprised because they weren't aware that that's what's happening. So yes, traditional infrastructure, be happy to support that. As you know, Rachel, we have been looking at community funding projects, or community project funding. We know that Senator Ernst and Senator Grassley have come out with a different viewpoint. We respect their viewpoints, but my personal feeling is that we know Iowa. Your representative knows Iowa in the 2nd District better than the president, or better than the chair of a committee. And so we want to advance those interests that are going to help Iowa, and especially the 2nd District, to be able to get people to work, be able to get families to where they need to go, and make Iowa the best place to live, work, and raise a family.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to just encourage everyone, if you have questions, I know we have a lot of city managers and university folks on this call. So if you have questions about this is the time to ask. So I'm gonna jump in with another question about, since you mentioned community funded projects. I just wanted to ask you, can you tell us, what your goals are for those earmarks, and how will you evaluate projects, and what objectives would you personally like to meet in some of these community funded projects?
Well, we had to put up some kind of list, metrics, if you will, for what we would look at. And at first we needed some clarification. So there are definite guardrails on these community project funding, especially given what had happened before in the past. So guardrails to make sure that there is not a financial benefit to the member of Congress, and other guardrails. I think very important that we're as transparent as possible with this process, and that also that we're funding those things that are within the guidelines that we were given. So there was funding had to be spent within a year. So we were looking at applications. We had a lot of applications, but primarily looking at those from state and local government. We had wanted clarification on 501c3s. That clarification came to us late. So in the future, although legal, it was something that was somewhat frowned upon because there weren't as many guardrails, if you will, for us. But looking forward, we're going to put forward a better system in order to address 501c3 applications. So primarily, we were looking at actually infrastructure projects submitted by state and local governments.
Excellent, thank you. So within those projects, are you thinking at all about, we had a really great comment from Jeff Fruin a few weeks ago at our Project Better Together meeting, just making sure that we're sort of getting the most out of our money as we look at these projects, and just creating and building into what Rachel said earlier, resiliency, whether that's bridges, like you mentioned, broadband. So can you tell us a little bit more about, how can we sort of future-proof our communities and make sure that we're prepared for the next pandemic, the next derecho, whatever that might be?
So I think that's a great question. And so we receive the applications. We have a standard form for the application, and Kyle, who's my legislative director, who is on this call with us, actually the first question he asks is always, can you tell us about your project and tell us why this is a good use of the taxpayers' money? So first and foremost, why is this a good use of the taxpayers' money? We also look at the level of community support. So it's very important for me that when we get an application, that there is community support for what we're doing, that it doesn't, it doesn't undercut a local business. If you're having, if it's a road project, does that road project impact small businesses? And if it does, is there an agreement? Has there been conversation with those small businesses? Has there been other avenues for traffic so that those small businesses aren't hurt during a project? So we actually are looking at projects, one, that will help the economy in that area, two, that can improve the area. Perhaps it's improving the quality of life in that area. Some of the projects we had put forward will improve quality of life. They may be economic drivers for an area. But most importantly, does it have community support? And is it a good use of the taxpayer money? So when we're looking at projects, that's how we're looking at them. We'll have some other parameters that will apply in the upcoming years, so that we can ensure that as the members, sometimes you'll get projects from people and we're doing a way to do those projects blinded, so that I don't know any of the individuals in a project. So when you've traveled around the second district as much as I have, it's not unusual to know people or to know mayors or supervisors or business people. And we want to make sure that everybody has as fair a shot as possible. This year we're allowed 10 projects. We also had some other projects in transportation and infrastructure, so we were able to get some great projects on that list, and I hope that they all get funded. There is no guarantee that any of the projects that we put forward will get funded, but we're hopeful that some of them will get funded. And Iowa City had several very good projects, and I look for. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in Johnson County. It's not my only county, but certainly one of our largest counties. There's things that I look forward to receiving from Johnson County or Iowa City in the future that I think would be very interested to work on. One of them you mentioned about preparing for things and working with the Iowa Flood Center. So we didn't receive anything from the Iowa Flood Center this time, but in the future would like to see that see some more of that, and then we'll put that in the context of clarifying what we can do with 501c3s. But those are things looking forward to working with them in the past, knowing the community's needs. And so I think as we continue to work with our communities and our district offices, we'll find more what communities need, what they value, and what helps them to prepare for the next pandemic or the next derecho, and to be able to prepare their communities and their small businesses in a way that helps them to thrive.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all of that. That helps a lot. So I am going to ask one last question. I heard you say you're on the education committee, and of course, our community, we pride ourselves on being the best place to live, work, and learn, right? So just want to ask you, along the theme of being resilient, I think a big portion of that is having a resilient workforce, and to have a resilient workforce, we have to have strong universities, strong community colleges, strong public school system. Do you have any thoughts now that you're on that education committee? What are you going to be carrying forward with you as your priorities for that committee?
Well, I can just relate to my first experience with the education and labor markup for the COVID-19 bill. And the amount of money that we're going to, it's about 130 billion. As I recall, there was already 60 billion that has been unspent that went through K through 12 and universities. And of that, in regards to the pandemic, had put forward an amendment that 2 billion of that money for K through 12 and 2 billion for universities would be reserved for mental health. I recognized very early on last year that mental health issues, depression, drug addiction, and drug overdoses and death from suicide would go up when we are isolating people in their homes. So I knew this. That has come to fruition, although I was challenged at the time as though I didn't believe the pandemic was serious, which I have always believed it's serious. But I think we are social animals, if you will, in the hierarchy as humans. We do well together in groups, and depending on what research you look at, in groups under 50, but nonetheless, we're social beings, and isolating people and removing those resources and support, even if you could connect virtually, would lead to more mental health problems and depression, and that certainly has come about. So it was disappointing that we couldn't even reserve, even though there was already 60 billion that had been passed in December and was unspent. This was another 130 billion to 160 billion that we could not carve out and reserve money for mental health, both at the university level and at the K through 12 level. So continuing to look on that, refine funding for Pell Grants was one of the things I heard last night with expanding the Pell Grants in the president's speech. It's something that of which I would be supportive. I think that we need to look very carefully at free college tuition, even at the community college level. And I say that having gone to community college, that's where I started when I was 16, and support my community college that's with not only in my hometown of Ottumwa with Indian Hills, but throughout the district, as well as our universities. Did my residency at the University of Iowa and was on faculty at the University of Iowa. So very supportive of those institutions. But some of the funding mechanisms, not so supportive because of things they can potentially lead to. And both as the director of public health, when I would address the dean of the medical school, Jean Robillard, Dr. Robillard, when he would come to speak with me about college tuitions and scholarships, doing scholarships alone doesn't do anything to the cost and the price of tuition and attending a college. So it's not only incumbent upon us to expand Pell Grants or help with funding, but it's also incumbent upon universities to look at their pricing mechanisms. So I think as we do scholarships, as we do grants, that universities and colleges also have a vested interest in this as well. And that's reducing tuition cost and looking at their programs to find out where there is value added, how much of it is going into education and teaching, and how much of it is going into administration. And I think that conceptually, I haven't heard that on the university side or as individuals talking about this. I also think that when we shift to programs that have either free community college or free tuition or loan forgiveness, that we shift people into a four-year college institution. So one of the things that we're learning about is community colleges working with high schools to shift people into trades. One of the bills I advanced is a vet tech bill, which is for military veterans, a 6-month training program in technology, in computers. So it's 6 months, it's a short course. It was a pilot program. I put forward this bill with Representative Kai Kahele from Hawaii, who's a Democrat, again, another bipartisan bill. He's also a military veteran. And this bill has more funding for this short course vet tech program. And in the very little, it's only a couple of years old, very little time it's been there, over 2,000 veterans have been employed after a short training course at an average salary of $62,000 a year. So I think as we look at education, we want people to also know that there are trades, there are apprenticeships, that you can graduate high school. Some people like to work with their hands. We need people in the skills trades. And so I think it's very careful that we don't skew people in a direction of a 2-year or 4-year college when they may be better suited to go into a different avenue that would lead to a very fulfilling career for them.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And thank you so much for your work with mental health. That has been definitely an issue. I have a high school student and a college student, so there's definitely been a lot of stress on our young people this year. So really appreciate your work on that and continuing to work on that, because that is definitely, when we talk about resilience, mental health is definitely a big piece of that. So I have no other questions for you. Thank you so much for taking all of my questions, and I appreciate your time. Are there any thoughts you would like to leave us with today?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, David Bywater. Yes, you're here. David, Congresswoman, do you know David Bywater? He is the president of True Art here in Iowa City, and it looks like he has a question for you.
Thank you, Congressperson. Good to see you today. I think I saw you earlier on television as well, so you've had a busy day already. I wanted to ask you about healthcare. Are you in a position to have any input on the evolving healthcare legislation that might come going forward? Have a lot of concern about insurance premiums for small businesses in particular. We have just gotten killed over the past 5 years. With our business in particular, we've seen what cost us $1 in 2015 go to almost $2.75 as far as insurance costs in a 5-year period. It's unsustainable. We cannot keep up with it. And we're trying to figure out what to do next related to that. And we've had to adopt some pretty interesting gymnastics type strategies to try to cope. And so I'm wondering if you're seeing anything that's starting to emerge related to improvements on the current healthcare landscape, and if you've got any opportunity for input.
So I do have opportunity for input, even though I'm not on Energy and Commerce. Energy and Commerce is the committee where there is healthcare. I'm a member of the Doctors Caucus, which does have influence. We've met with Representative Liz Cheney in our conference. And then also they're developing a task force. We just talked about this the past couple of days. And so I have asked to be on the task force for healthcare. So certainly we're looking at that. We know that cost, especially for small businesses, is a tremendously difficult issue. And it's just not only the cost of insurance. I think the two biggest things I hear from small businesses are health insurance costs, prescription drug costs, providing for their employees, and then getting workforce because of the way the unemployment benefits have been extended. And that may not be too much of an issue for you, but it certainly is for other small businesses. So yes, I hope to have as much influence as possible. I have found, I think just keeping your nose to the grindstone and working hard that I'm having more influence. It was a real honor to be invited to not only be one of the few members to attend to the State of the Union put forward by my leadership, but also one of the few members to escort the president into the chambers. And so I think that's a reflection of leadership's support and confidence in me as a member of Congress. So I do think there are things that we can do in a bipartisan fashion. I'm looking forward to working with them. Matter of fact, I was talking with Representative Jay Paul last night, and also Representative Debbie Dingell from Michigan, Representative Jay Paul from Washington. One was about testing for COVID-19 and the University of Washington having a test early on, and how we can work together in public-private partnerships. And then with Debbie Dingell on some of the insurance and health insurance issues. So I would continue to seek out opportunities to advance healthcare issues, and would love to talk with you more about that, David.
I have a letter I'll send you, but with an idea in it. Okay. In other words, it's not just a
Perfect.
rant, I promise. Okay.
You can send rants too, and Kyle Jacobs is on this call with us. Kyle is my legislative director. I think that you have his information. If you don't, it's Kyle, K-Y-L-E Jacobs, Jacobs @mail.house.gov. I think most what I want to convey to you all is that I sincerely appreciate everything you do. It is small businesses that become larger businesses. And the reason why I'm concerned about minimum wage, I'm concerned about forced unionization, I'm concerned about roads and bridges and access to your businesses, is that there is no large business without a small business. There is no large business without somebody taking the risk to promote an idea or a service. And people see large businesses and they see, Fortune 500 executives, but they don't see the person who had an idea, took a huge risk, put everything they had into it, working 60, 80, 100 hours a week, because that's what you work. I know, I've been there, in order to promote and develop a small business and get it up and running and profitable. And the profits always go back into the business. They always go back into hiring more people. And I haven't met a small business owner that doesn't want to pay their employees as much as possible, provide as many benefits as possible, make them happy and fulfilled within that business, so that business continues to grow. So I just want to thank you for that, all of your efforts. It means a lot to me, and I want to do what I can to support you in that effort.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. It's great to connect with you, and please let us know if you would ever like our input on any of the issues you're trying to tackle. We're here to help. David Bywater is a great one to talk to. So thank you so much for your time today, Congresswoman. We've recorded this, and we will put it onto our Facebook page so you can share it with others. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You all be safe, be well, and get vaccinated if you haven't.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.